Hello, everyone. You're watching CrunchRepublican live, if anybody decides to watch. Uh, I'm Brandon, and I'm here with my good friend Devin. I don't know why he just muted his microphone, but you could say hi if you want to, Devin.
Huh?
Yeah, okay.
Hello.
Introduce yourself to the people.
My name is Devin, and I will provide a contrasting viewpoint for the purpose of this podcast.
See, now I know our friend Daniello does podcasts, but this is more, I don't know what this is. Could be podcast. It's kind of like a live
Live stream?
forum, stream, forum, doesn't matter. It's whatever. Um, so it's great to be with you guys on YouTube tonight. We've been pretty busy and haven't been able to talk, Devin and I, for the past couple of weeks. So it's good to get together to talk about the current state of the election. Hopefully, we don't go on too long, but it will definitely be definitely will be a lengthy discussion. So hopefully, I don't mess up my words tonight. Um, so, as most of you know, based on the title of this channel and the profile picture, I am a conservative Republican, and Devin is what now? Leaning less
Moderate.
left than before, just moderate.
Yeah, leaning less left than before. That's a good phrase.
So we wanted to talk about the current state of the election, especially with all this crazy stuff that's going on both sides. Um, and I guess I'll give you the get go, Devin. Just bring up whatever issue comes to mind because this is really just kind of off the top of our heads here.
Um, in this election, there's been a lot of issues. I think the central driving point of this whole election is how people are interpreting political propaganda from both the right and the left, and the way that people exploit the media to their advantage.
Right. Um, there's definitely been a manipulation of the media, or at least a inherent media bias, especially when it comes to Hillary Clinton. I don't think that there's been that much bias in the past. I mean, certainly there has been, but not as much as there is in this election from stations like CNN and MSNBC for Hillary Clinton. You see the headlines and they're blatantly biased. I saw one today. Like, even though Trump is ahead by 2 points in the new September 1st to the 4th CNN ORC poll, um, they say Trump, what was it? Trump flops on immigration plan again, something like that.
I feel like people, I don't know what the correct word would be, but I feel like people either look for positivity or negativity because we like to either blame the issue or, you know, put the issue on a pedestal on
Right.
to somebody else. So I think that these two candidates are the perfect people who we can either blame or idolize from both sides.
That's very true. They're both very polar opposites, and the way that politics has become increasingly polarized in the past couple of decades is really kind of reaching a peak now. They couldn't be more further apart, and that's a basic fact of this election. If you haven't been hiding under a rock for the past year and a half, um, frankly, there's bias inherent on both sides, and it's very very strong. However, it seems more of an inclination of the liberal left, and I'm not saying all people on the liberal left, but a lot of people on the liberal left. Um, it seems for them an inclination to engage in acts which are very uncivil, or just not civil.
I think it depends on where you're looking from. I think that it really depends on for this is really lack of professionalism here, but in this election I've seen basically it's how are the candidates feeling on any particular day, and if
Uh
they're in
huh.
a they're in a bad mood, I feel like they bash the other candidate. If they're in a good mood, they praise the other candidate. That's really how I've seen it turn out. Even to the primaries with Bernie and Hillary and Marco and Trump.
Right. Oh, I'm sorry. I was letting you continue. I
Oh,
was just agreeing with you.
yeah. So I think that it's really been more so it's been centered around like the candidate's personal biases
Yeah.
and like I guess also toward the people trying to appeal to their biases.
See, I'm very glad that you brought that up because it seems like a very personal election. There's not much focusing on policy, which people should be focusing on. It's more like, here's, Hillary's health problems, for example, and here's how corrupt she is. And um, I mean, she is very corrupt. That goes without saying. And then here's, Donald Trump's failures in business. Here's, his family, him making comments about his daughter, him making comments about his wife, the fact that he has had more than one wife. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
and I mean,
definitely.
it all kind of comes together and it coagulates into some kind of reality show instead of, which isn't reality at all. Um, when you look at it very subjectively, of course, and it really just turns into the essence of what America is today. People are lazily ignoring the major issues of this campaign. They don't seem to care the amounts of influence that the candidates could have on the world after this election. We face a lot of issues inside our country and out. We have a very divided country, whether you want to acknowledge it or not. We do.
I
We
agree.
have problems that need to be addressed. And one of my biggest problems that I've really been kind of putting at the forefront now is the fact that if we elect the Democratic Party's candidate this election cycle, and I explained this in my last video,
Yeah,
is
I
that
watched it.
yeah, if we decide to appoint, it could be three, four, five Supreme Court justices, an unprecedented number appointed by a president in history, that are all leaning left. Let's remember, first of all, the Supreme Court has become very politicized. I mean, look at Ruth Bader Ginsburg's comments on Donald Trump just a few months ago. She had to formally come out and apologize. It's not the Supreme Court's
Place.
it's not the Supreme Court's place or style to be any justice on the Supreme Court, the highest court in the
Bias. Yeah.
land, to be biased politically, because that show. I mean, that's why so many people, whether you morally support their morals or not, wanted Ruth Bader Ginsburg to Justice Ginsburg to resign, because it worries the people when the court, the highest court in the land, which interprets the laws and interprets the meaning of the entire Constitution, becomes biased towards one side or another. Every Supreme Court justice should believe in what the Constitution stands for, whether they're liberal or conservative, and try to apply the logic from the Constitution and based on what they know in law, only on the premise of fact and not of opinion. And if we appoint liberal Supreme Court justices that are on Hillary Clinton's low brow level, we can see a very drastic interpretation of the Constitution, which could, in extreme case, resort in the abolishment of certain rights that we are granted in the Constitution, whether that's First Amendment rights through a new amendment, or whether that means that the rights have a new that they're construed differently to mean something to the politically correct left. And I want to know your take on that because it is a very serious issue.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I think that depends on the judges, but of course, they try to have it so that it's just one judge, so that way it doesn't really affect the political spectrum. But I do think that perhaps it's I wouldn't say it's a good thing, but I think it provides more balance. And here's my take on this. I think if you have an all Democratic Congress, you should have a Republican Supreme Court And if you have a Republican Congress, you should have a, uh, you know what I mean, right?
Yes, well, I disagree with you. You're talking about the separation of powers here, but you
Yeah.
have to remember that the Supreme Court must fairly interpret the laws of the land. No matter who controls Congress, no matter where those congressional appointments come from, whether it's the House or the Senate, um, there needs to be, regardless of political affiliation, there needs to be a full understanding and a full and fair interpretation of the Constitution in the Supreme Court, no matter who controls Congress, no matter who controls the House, no matter who controls the Senate, or no matter who controls the executive branch, because
Well,
presidents will try to appoint Supreme Court justices who lean towards their side in order to get an interpretation of the Constitution based on the way that they see it. Now, you can question the morals as much as you like, but the appointments need to be as fair as possible. Um, but I believe that there must be a level of conservatism there that respects the Constitution and the original intent on which it was built.
so you're looking for the original interpretation.
Yeah, because if you look at the original interpretation, excuse me, of the Constitution, well, actually, let's step back for a second. Let's take a look at today. Today, the federal government is vastly more superior to state governments because every state government, pretty much through selective incorporation and through other Supreme Court cases, follows the Bill of Rights, follows the Federalist policies of you're going to follow what's in the national Constitution and not just your state constitutions. And for example, with laws like the legalization of marijuana, you're walking a very fine line because in places like Colorado and parts of California, um, you're looking at people who are legally growing cannabis there, um, but are also considered fugitives, punishable by the death penalty in some cases, in the eyes of the federal government. So now when you take a look at how how the Constitution must be interpreted, and how the today the federal government has become much bigger than state governments. Back in the day, and by back in the day, I mean, of course, before 1787, during the Constitutional Convention, of course, the states and the government were meant to be exactly the same size. No one had the power over the other. And that's the beauty of the separation of powers, but it seems like we've lost it.
Or is that? Are you finished?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. Um, I think that to an extent, you're correct, but I think that we need a degree of progressive policies. Not to the extent that they're currently being carried out.
I understand.
Yeah, but I think if you look at the original interpretation, you're looking at a different time period. So while some of the stuff that you look at is accurate, I think that you have to also factor in new times and stuff like that. Now, um, definitely there's too much federal government power in certain aspects,
Mm-hmm.
but there's also not too much state power in certain aspects as well.
See, now, you bring up the fact that some of the amendments or laws brought forth in the Constitution are obsolete, and that there must be a sense of progressivism in order to kind of change the interpretation of these laws to kind of fit the modern day. So I can give you a really good example of that. So, like the Second Amendment, where you have the right to bear arms, but I mean, to what extent uh, is it really going too far? I can understand, because they didn't have AK-47s and MP5s, um, and assault weapons to the scale that we have today back in the 1700s. And the right to bear arms is a totally different thing. And again, you're looking on a global scale. How big and blown up the issue has become, and as well how influential we have become in the world. The United States was not what it was back then. Now, and I can totally agree with you on that. But there needs to be a sense of kind of respecting the original interpretation of the Constitution, to kind of work our way legally, of course, around laws that might seem vague today. So to apply principles from the original interpretation of our Constitution to today. I'm not saying completely change them. I'm not saying go totally forward and ignore them. All I'm saying is that the original intent must be respected, and those initial inherent principles that were inherent during the ratification of the Constitution should be put into practice today.
So could you give some examples as to how we are not staying true to original interpretation?
Well, sure. I mean, you look at how we have. I'm trying to think of the right word for it. Formal and informal amendments, for example, to the Constitution. It takes a long time, especially when you need 3/4 of the states to ratify a new amendment to the Constitution. So I think that, in a sense, based on some of the political bias in the Supreme Court, that judicial review, which is an informal way to amend the Constitution, has really stepped past its bounds. So, for example, when you think about those circuit courts, for example, now I know this is probably going to get a lot of heat, but you think about those circuit courts that were that said gay marriage, same-sex marriage is legal in this state, so now it has to be legal in all 50. Our president and liberals in our government jumped at the chance to, hey, you know what, let's make it legal in all 50 states, instead of respecting the 10th Amendment to the Constitution, which states that anything not in the Constitution is up respectively to the states or the people. Mm-hmm. Now, listen, my belief is that if you want to be together with somebody of the same sex as you, go ahead and do it. But I think that, it should definitely be up to the states to ratify such laws as same-sex marriage, because changing the definition of marriage to me seems like, and of course I'm saying this as a Republican, seems like it strays from traditional American values. Mm-hmm. Now that's going to bring a very fair or unfair connotation, depending on who you are and what you side with. But the thing is to not, but the thing is to not politicize the issue and to just look at it straightforward from the original interpretation of our founding fathers. This wasn't an issue for them back in 1787. Same-sex marriage wasn't really an issue for America back then, but now it is. Yeah. And because it says, because they had very traditional values back then, and because they were very what's the word I'm looking for? They were very tuned into Judeo-Christian values. This was not a problem for them, and so I think that because they put the 10th Amendment in, it allows this. It allows it to be up to the states or the people to ratify these laws. Maybe even hold a referendum in a state. That would be good to pass same-sex marriage laws, because a lot of people in different states really want the right to marry who they want to marry, and if they want to do that, they should. They instead of making circuit courts immediately to skip a few steps and become the law of the land, what it should be is that you should say, hey, listen, people in whatever state. So let's say it's. Did you just sneeze?
No, sister.
Oh, there's a sneeze in the background. Well, bless whoever's sneezing. But let's say the state, for example, is, I don't know, New Jersey. I don't know, New Jersey, just random. So let's say that this whole same-sex marriage decision was not had not been ratified and brought nationwide. So now, what should have happened in a state like New Jersey is that the people should have petitioned, just as they can, in the First Amendment, they should petition for a redress of grievances, just like that they're allowed, and say, listen, we want to have a referendum for all the people in this state to vote on a law where we can marry someone of the same sex. And so that would go to the state government, and then the next time that you're allowed to vote on state laws, you hold a referendum, and whoever wins wins. That's democracy. That's the way our country works. You don't just skip steps and make it the law of the land. Listen, you want to be with who you want to be with, that's great, but I think that redefining marriage, redefining that definition, should be up to the states on a case by case basis. I know you're taking a lot of time to think. This is a very big issue.
No, I'm sorry, I'm doing stuff.
Oh yeah, I know.
Um, see, I mean, I agree to an extent, but like I think it's probably what
You,
I'll
you, you can
say.
either agree to an extent or you agree wholeheartedly. This isn't like maybe some of it should be up to the country and some of it should be up to the states. I know for a fact, as do many other people, that it was wrong to just skip a few steps and make same-sex marriage the law of the land just because some liberals, got pissed off. And I'm sure it goes way deeper than that. I have no doubt
Yeah,
it goes
yeah,
way deeper than that. Um,
yeah.
and I can respect that. But the fact that we kind of neglected um, steps that were intended to be taken from the very foundation of this country really annoys me. Um, and it should have been left up to the states. And whether you agree or not that the decision was morally right, you have to agree that it was kind of unfair to just push the agenda immediately and say, all right, well, you know what? Here it is. Yeah, a complete redefinition of marriage, the way it had been in America for more than 200 years, is a very big thing, especially because this country has grown so fast.
You done?
Yeah. Oh, yes, I am.
Okay, I'm not sure. Um, see, yeah, definitely, I agree with you on the first part, but the thing is, certain issues are, I guess, on a large global scale. So I think you are entitled to the right of because think about this, for example. When you first came up with the Constitution in America, you didn't have any
I like it how you're
Congress.
saying I came up with it. You're saying when you came up with the Constitution, like I'm not
um,
that old. I'm not that old. I'm older than you, but I'm not that old. Anyway,
when our founding fathers, is that they first came up with the Constitution, they didn't have a Congress to go to or anything like that. And also later in history, you see certain cases like Supreme Court cases become the law of the land. Now I'm just wondering, is that what you think should happen for steps to be skipped or to set a precedent? I guess is that it should be taken to the Supreme Court first.
well, it kind of depends on where the situation stems from. Again, as we mentioned before, the Supreme Court interprets the laws of the United States and interprets the meaning of the Constitution. So that must be fair and as unbiased and unpoliticized as possible. So I think that anything should be made the law of the land by the process of states voting because of the 10th Amendment, granting the states or the people power to anything that's not in the Constitution. Um, or it should be up to the Supreme Court if a case goes that far. Like I mentioned before, selective incorporation, same kind of thing. Um, you look at different cases like Texas versus Johnson, for example, in
Mhm.
1989, I think it was, where some dude in Texas um, burned the American flag in protest. Now, it was very vague as to exactly how the American flag should be treated, but there are certain rules that don't, now we know today, that don't necessarily have to be followed by law, by state or federal law. But oh, probably someone talking in the background. But anyway, I'm gonna continue. It was very vague as to exactly how the American flag should be treated. And when the case reached the Supreme Court, it was ruled in a 5-4 decision that it was legal to burn the American flag. However, it should be discouraged. But it is a valid form of protest. But then, obviously you can be arrested on many different charges. For example, if you take somebody else's American flag and burn it, then that's destruction of property. Or if you're doing it in a place that could harm people, then you're probably disturbing the peace. So again, it used to be a very vague issue, and people didn't really know that it was actually protected under the Constitution to burn an American flag as protest. But sure, it could definitely reach different levels of, how exactly are you going to get, is the government going to get you and prosecute you for doing that? Not necessarily for burning the American flag, because if you have your own flag, you're in your own space, and you do it, you can't get prosecuted. But if you're in a public space where you can harm people, where you don't have a license to do something, I'd actually discussed this today, or you're destroying other people's property, then sure, you can be prosecuted for that. So there are some ways in which laws can be fairly interpreted and become the law of the land, so to speak. But again, just to reiterate my point from before, because I see we have a couple of new viewers now, actually, which is interesting. Same-sex marriage should have been left up to the states as per the 10th Amendment. In order to become the law of the land, all 50 states would have to successfully ratify it, unless there was a referendum in all 50 states, in which case you'd probably need a 3/4 vote of the states. But either way, my personal belief, again, you be with whoever you want to be with, that's fine, but I think that it should be up to the states for the people to decide just exactly what the definition of marriage is compared to the traditional values of our country. So that's my point. I know you're still muted, but if you want to come in on this, please chime in whenever you can. I heard something. Will he come back? That is the question. Just so you know, guys, that's not me restricting his freedom of speech. That's totally his prerogative. So what is this? Okay, so he was trying to talk to me in the chat before, which makes total perfect sense. Alana, I got a message here. It says, so, okay. I'm gonna let Devin speak to me. Hopefully, oh, okay, so he's typing. Okay, I see. He says, so essentially I have similar thoughts. So I guess I'll be Devin's interpreter for the next however many minutes. One point that I made very early on, and he's saying one point that you made very early on, so meaning me. I know, it's a long wait. It's a very long wait, guys. I'm so sorry. Bisexual or homosexual relationships were common. In 1776. I said that they weren't common back in the 1700s because we were there were a lot of Christians in our country. You're back.
But they were.
Well, I don't know. I don't think that that's a valid point. I don't think that they could be considered common, especially when, I mean, you look back in history. you're looking at mostly, Christian, very,
Oh
very,
yeah,
very organized Christian. I mean, they believed in creationism. Our founding fathers. Now, I don't think that a lot of people at the time, especially people descending from Puritan Christians, were very in line with the belief of same-sex marriage.
yeah. But you know the basis of Catholicism was started in Rome,
Yes,
and even like since the beginning of time, bisexual relationships were extremely common in Rome.
but this is not in the United States. You're talking about Rome, and you're talking about Catholicism there. Again, I'm talking about theists in
Yeah, yeah.
America,
I'm
people,
just saying that
Christians. I'm sorry, go ahead.
it's popular Christian belief that we didn't have bisexual relationships in America, but in
No, I'm not.
any
No, I'm not saying that we didn't have bisexual or homosexual relationships in America. I'm
you're
saying
just saying they weren't as common.
no. It's not that they weren't as common; they were very uncommon.
Oh, okay, okay. So you think there's been a shift, I guess, in
Oh yes,
terms of
totally. There has as in the past few decades, how we've shifted uh, leftward as a country and as a globe too. I mean, you look at the globalist policies that are taking hold of countries like Germany today. It's abhorrent. You're not a country if you don't have borders. That's a strict belief of mine. You got to uphold, your country, your land, and if someone tries to, yeah, come into it, you better tell them to assimilate. At least, in part. It should be a very big part. I mean, don't forget your native culture from wherever you come from. Please use it to contribute to society. We are a melting pot, or as Donald Trump would say, we're more like a salad, I guess. I don't know, because you can pull pieces out of a salad. But all jokes aside, we really are a melting pot of ideals, and we wouldn't be the country we are if we didn't have so much influence from many different countries, such as Germany. We wouldn't have the technology we had today if it wasn't for Germany. We wouldn't have um, we wouldn't have our system of education or our system of speech if it wasn't for the Romans. Um, so, I mean, you look back far enough, everything will stem itself in a certain type of education going back far enough. Um, but yes, definitely, I think that we have shifted uh, in a very big way. You can go if you want, if you can. Okay, he says yes. So he's kind of like in the middle of, like, he's mixing up typing and talking at the same time. It's probably just a lot of noise in the background. Okay. I'm just waiting for him to respond.
certain things
Oh,
can be interpreted by the government, I guess, if they're progressive enough, or if they have enough demand.
what do you mean by progressive enough?
If they reflect the modern times, I guess.
Okay. I don't necessarily see that as progressive so much as it is uh, just modern in the way that just the way that society is today. I don't see it as progressive in a sense as the definition of progressive is today, especially when it means more like regressive. Because you're looking at, for example, designated free speech zones on college campuses, um, and the segregated college campuses, segregated retreats for different students. But they say it makes them feel better and that they're not oppressed anymore. I think that people just need to kind of step beyond their boundaries and say, listen, if I get offended, I'm going to say, listen, I'm offended, and people should work it out like adults. Devin, if you said something to me that I really disliked, I would tell you right out right off the bat, listen, Devin, I didn't like that. I didn't like what you said, and I'd like you to apologize out of respect for me,
Luckily,
because
that rarely
no matter
happens.
no matter see, but that's because people are not being civil. They're resorting technically to their animal instincts, and they're yelling and they're screaming, "I can't take this!" Because of words, they retreat to a safe space. And this should not be happening. People, need to understand sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Words don't hurt physically, no matter how much a lot of people on the liberal left, the far liberal left, would like to attest to that. Words cannot physically hurt you. But if you said, the point stands though, if you said something to me, I'd be like, listen, Devin, I did not like what you just said. Please take that back out of respect for me. And that would be the end of it. Because I'm telling you, you have done something to me which affects me personally. And you, as another another respectful human being, should be able to say, okay, I'm sorry. Now, if you didn't, I'd be like, okay, what can I do? Go to my safe space? Retreat from society? No. I'll ignore you, is what I'll do, and I'll continue on with my merry life.
Hmm.
And that's what, I'm just saying, this is, people used to understand this. This is what I was raised with. These are the principles I was raised with. You have to have some sort of self-confidence, but no one has it because they're not being raised by parents or by a mother who really my mother raised me perfectly. At least to my knowledge, I was raised brilliantly by my parents. And my mother is a very, very, very successful woman. She's done a lot in her life that is really good. She was a woman at the top of a male-dominated workplace and came out earning more than they did in commissions, and she still does because she continues working hard at what she does. But yet she still had the time, especially because I had other women in my family present who were there to help raise me. I was able to receive love, caring, compassion at very vital stages in my life where I grew up to understand love. I grew up to understand the love of my family. I grew up to understand God's love and his love for each and every one of us. And I grew up to understand that strength comes from that. Personal responsibility and individual liberty stem just from the principles of being taken care of and being loved. And when you're ready to move, on your own in the world, you better have some sort of self-confidence based on that to back yourself up. You need to stand up for what you believe in. And that's just the way I was raised. I don't know about you. I'm not criticizing the way that you were raised in any way, shape, or form. But I do believe that, a sense of personal responsibility is inherent in any person who is raised with love at those vital stages and with God and with God's promise. I don't mean to bash anybody who doesn't believe in God. I have, the most respect for anybody who will stand up and defend their beliefs, as long as it doesn't infringe on other people's beliefs.
Yeah, I agree, and that's why I find this political spectrum so interesting. Because I don't know about now, but with our generation, a lot of people are raised in a similar fashion.
It's very spontaneous. It's erratic, almost, the way that these people are being raised. They don't learn these crucial values at a point, and it's a very reasonable hypothesis to make. I'm pretty sure you can agree with me.
Yeah, I definitely, and I think it leads to a less productive society.
And a less educated society as well, because we're being taught very basic ideals. You look back at your history class, at government classes, we're being taught very basic ideals, and we're not being taught to look beyond the horizons, to look beyond what's just beyond visible reach, and to kind of grasp at, where can I really place my beliefs? What's really in the center of all that? What deals were made at the center of this big thing? Or whatever the question may be that is posed. You can't just look at things basic, with a very basic point of view, I should say. You need to go in depth and really take a look at if you want to firmly root your beliefs in something, if you really want to take the time to invest your knowledge in something, it should be something that isn't that that isn't so basic as to the point where you can kind of just brush it off with a single stroke.
Yeah. Hmm.
So I mean, well, what's your take on that? What's your take on the whole debate of how we're treating our children? I kind of want to end this soon though, so I'll give you the last point. But what's your whole debate on how we're treating children these days, and the roles of the parent, um, and what should be done to help create a more productive and educated society in America?
I think it depends a lot on like upbringing, I guess.
Yeah,
But I think with the rise of technology, not only children but parents think that less involvement is needed with that relationship. And part of that is what leads to a much more productive society because you have the outliers that use technology to gain knowledge, and then you have people who use technology to find loopholes, I guess. I think it comes back to technology and the rising structure that is becoming more prevalent due to modern politics of like this hierarchical structure, I guess.
right.
Yeah. So when those two things are combined along with like the child and the parent and the situation, a bunch of personal factors, I think that's where you get the current thing we have now. I think that yes, morals have changed though in like the last 20 years.
I think that it's been a gradual change. Like I've said, in the past couple of decades, we've really swung left. Um, but I mean, there have been very gradual changes. You look at the conservative revolution. You look at the like the Reagan Revolution, 1980. Um, we were especially in the 1970s. We did not know who to elect. We didn't have anyone who could really step up to the plate. You had Nixon with Watergate, which is nowhere near as terrible as Hillary is today. Just saying, I mean, it's a conservative. Listen, guys, it's a conservative show. What were you going to expect? Okay, seriously, it was going to attack Hillary at some point or another. It was going to happen. But I
Yeah.
mean, you had Nixon and Watergate. You had Ford and his one term. You had Carter and his weakness as a president, and then Reagan comes by and completely took it by storm. Now there are some things that he did, increase the national debt, which Bill Clinton did end up fixing. I'm not going to sugarcoat it in any way, shape, or form. Bill Clinton did some good things for our economy, and he strengthened jobs, and that's really where it comes to. After Bill Clinton, we have George W. Bush, we have 9/11, we have the Patriot Act,
Mhm.
and how laws really and the structure of the family, and then we come to Obama, and gay rights, and a new civil rights movement, I guess, coming about. It's a very interesting time in our history to be living in,
Yeah.
especially as young people and as millennials. Um, but needless to say, there are many different perspectives which can be discussed in a civil manner, which can really be constructive to creating a more educated viewpoint for people who might not put themselves in any particular major situation, whether that be in their community, their state, or their country. So, on that note, do you have anything to say to close?
I think we've tried our best to convey that last point that you made, civil arguments to help educate people. And I think that something we need to do more is remove bias, I guess, since we have so much bias like around us. It's difficult these days. But, I think as we've demonstrated to the best of our ability, when you remove bias the best way possible or the best way that you can, it ultimately leads to a more educated discussion and people could get more out of.
All right, you're good.
Yeah.
Okay, so on that note, Devin, first of all, I really want to thank you for joining me tonight. This was totally unexpected, and I had a very nice time chatting with you about all these social issues and chatting a little bit with you about the election, which is really what this thing was supposed to be about, but we went on our own track.
Side
Um,
tangent.
yeah, but I really appreciate you joining me. It's always good to have a sort of opposing perspective, even though we agreed on a lot, to kind of counteract. So thank you, Devin.
Yeah, I love being on here, Bren. It's fun.
And we'll have to do it some other time, maybe with a few other people, maybe do another special like this. Um, but that's all from me. I think that's all from you.
Yep.
And on that note, I want to thank you all, well, all two or three of you, for joining me tonight. For those of you that joined from Twitter, thank you so much. And for those of you that will be watching, thank you so much for tuning in. And I guess that's it. So I'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Keep it real.